Global meltdown in communication. BBC Two finds out in Attack on the Wires.
What happens when the worst terrorist attack in history strikes the densest cluster of communication networks on the planet?
I knew immediately it was worthless to even try to use the cell. The antennas were on top of the Trade Center.
What happens when a wireless network is destroyed and phone lines get crushed?
Everything in the building serving over 200,000 customers is dead in the water.
What happens when 500 million people try to call the same place at the same time?
We need to rethink what emergency communications mean in the age of the internet.
Due to an emergency in the area you are calling, your call cannot be completed at this time. Please try your call later.
Far from the unfolding chaos in Lower Manhattan is a high-security underground command center for AT&T Global Operations. AT&T claims that it's the largest and most sophisticated command and control operation of its kind anywhere in the world. Denise Strecker was the network manager in charge on September the 11th.
As a shift manager, I've been through many disasters at this point. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, fires, bombings, overseas war. I mean, the list could be long.
95.
September the 11th would be one of the most tumultuous days in the history of long-distance calling.
We have 3 large television screens repeated across the wall boards. And it's not so much that anybody is sitting there actually watching them, but you will immediately pick up out of the corner of your eye if something unique happens.
Yeah. This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
Now, from our point of view, when it comes to running the network, it's not as significant when the event occurs. The significant time frame for us is when the news media starts reporting it.
We stood in a state of shock for about a minute, and then at that point we knew the AT&T network was going to be requesting a lot of data and a lot of calls going through it.
When there is an emergency situation, people will immediately grab the telephone and try to call a loved one, business associate, family or friend in the impact area. We get into what we call a focused overload on the network. Millions of people across the country and around the world tried to call New York City all at one time.
So at that point we started assembling teams. We've taken the Network Operations Center and broken it up into segments. One might be international, one might be the data IP internet, another console might be the transport medium.
AT&T would prepare to cope with unprecedented demand. The New York City infrastructure would prepare to cope with unprecedented destruction. One of New York City's most important telephone exchanges on West Street, next to the World Trade Center complex, received a near-fatal blow when 1,000 tons of steel came crashing down on 4.5 million voice and data lines. Wall Street was disrupted, hundreds of thousands of residents lost service, and New York City's emergency 911 phone network was in jeopardy.
What we're looking at in this area was 7 World Trade. That was a 44-story skyscraper right next to our building. That caught fire and ultimately collapsed late in the day on Tuesday, crashed against our building. It caused the damage that you can see to the exterior of the building and then damaged the electronics inside the building. In terms of big central offices, this is as big as they come. The machines here, on first glance, look so filthy I questioned whether we'd ever be able to get them back in service. Some areas were so seriously damaged we knew we couldn't restore the equipment. We built walls around it and just stayed away from it. So here's a building where the equipment is never, ever designed to be turned off, and everything in the building serving over 200,000 customers is dead in the water. So that's a situation we've never seen before.
When these high-capacity switches are not being crushed by falling beams, choked by debris clouds, or starved for power, they generate dial tone and route calls with precision to their intended destinations. They are the brains of New York City's telecommunication infrastructure. The routing days are over for these switchers.
Basically, I'm talking to the manager over in the West Street Central office who's responsible to watch the network at that point. And then the second plane hits. Right after that, there's an announcement that I hear in the background saying, you know, everyone should get out of the West Street Central office. So I said to John, hey, you know, get the people and get out of there. We'll take the network over from here.
On September the 11th, Verizon managed their national network from a war room in their New Jersey headquarters. Verizon is America's largest local phone service provider. On a slow day, they might oversee 1 billion calls passing through 1,200 central offices from Maine to Virginia. Over 300 million calls from the New York City area alone.
It was unbelievable. Everything was lit up. You didn't even know what you were looking at because there was just so much data coming out every 5 minutes.
With powerful software tools at his command, Dan Check confronted a network in crisis.
This is what we looked at for the first couple of hours of the World Trade Center disaster.
The screens provided trunk group status reports.
We have a Verizon office going to another Verizon office. We see red, so we know we have to take a look at it, and it's showing us call attempts, call blockages, and it's telling us that 51% of the calls are not getting through at this time.
My job at that point is just to get traffic around West Street. I have to focus on the rest of the network, and that's sitting there as kind of an island.
So we would take this group to another page for further investigation and find out where we can reroute the phone call, and then type it in, point and click, and instant the call reroutes.
When a network encounters a global avalanche, there's no escape, and rerouting isn't an option.
If you look at one of the wall boards and you see an outline of the United States and the map is completely black, that means everything is running very smoothly. When something unique starts to occur, you will see color lines start popping up on the various wall boards. On the morning of September 11th, a map that was totally black within a matter of 5 minutes turned a brilliant, brilliant blue as we saw lines automatically start appearing from every major switching center in the United States into the New York and Washington, D.C. areas.
If a focus overload is too fast and too hard, we could take some of our equipment down.
Average business morning like that, we'd probably be handling about 2 million new calls every 5 minutes. We jumped up to 4.1 and 4.2 million call attempts every 5 minutes.
In emergencies, dial tone becomes a precious commodity, and there's only so much of it to go round.
When the first tower collapsed, we felt that this required a code blue, as we would call it, alert here.
Code blue alerts have happened before. Hurricanes, floods, and other natural disasters can trigger them.
You stop doing day-to-day kinds of activities within the switching machines. We don't want them doing what they call translation changes, routing changes. It uses up the real time of the system. It makes it busy trying to process some kind of other order when it could be processing a dial tone.
If we just allow all the call attempts that are going across the network to hit New York City, there'll be no circuits available for people trying to call out of the area. And perhaps even more critically, there would not be circuits available for people to dial 911.
I've never seen calling volumes in the network like this. Probably 5 or 10 times greater than the worst thing that I've ever seen.
One of the tools we use following an emergency situation is call gapping.
With call gapping, a percentage of calls can be electronically blocked at their source to reduce traffic crossing the network.
You might determine that call gapping 50 is what we want to do. The shift manager will indicate what level he or she wants the call gapping set at, and a few quick keystrokes, and the call gapping takes effect. 50% of the call attempts would be stopped at the originating switch.
Due to an emergency in the area you are calling, your call cannot be completed at this time.
Millions of callers may end up frustrated or confused by what they hear. It might be a busy signal or a pre-recorded message.
On September 11th, I was very concerned because I had family members that were in the World Trade Center complex, and I too could not reach them. And I was in a position which was no different than the customer sitting at their home. The call gapping that was implemented would have also controlled my calls when I made them from here also. I tried three phone calls from here, and that was all.
Now the towers had collapsed. We had lost 50,000 lines.
Suddenly, a vast number of phantom phone lines threatened to choke the network even further.
If we did nothing, you would be able to pick up your phone in New Jersey, call that number, the call would go over to New York, probably carried by an interexchange carrier. It would have gone into the Tandem office in New York, which is an intermediate switching point, and it would have tried to complete. We would have tied up 3 trunks at least.
Electronic alerts had to be sent to every telephone exchange in the country to block calls to numbers that would never be answered.
What happened here, which was unprecedented, was the fact that we now had the Pentagon hit. We were under attack, and that we would go to the highest level, which we've never ever done. With the code red, we ask everyone just to stop working in the network no matter what they're doing.
Only the most essential crisis-related work would continue.
Everybody felt that it would only be in case of nuclear war or something else that had happened that would have caused you to take such a dramatic step.
Fearing that the network itself might come under attack, under Code Red, a sudden loss of capacity anywhere on the network can be more readily detected and reported to federal authorities and the Department of Defense. While the local phone network was partially crippled and long-distance lines jammed, the internet, which was designed to survive the unpleasant effects of Soviet missiles, seemed to be working. Millions who received a busy signal trying to call New York City would have no difficulty reaching a local internet service provider. In spite of the fact that many Lower Manhattan residents did not have access to the internet because of damage to phone and data lines locally, email was beginning to fill a crucial information void. When information about people missing in the World Trade Center was still impossible to obtain, there remained countless New Yorkers desperate to tell a friend or loved one that they were okay. And the residents of Battery Park City, across the street from the World Trade Center, would have lots of worried friends.
I evacuated south into the debris cloud. Once I got to Staten Island, I was able to get through to one friend on my cell who immediately circulated email that I was okay.
One friend of mine sent me a list of people she had heard from and asked if I could possibly share that list around and spread the word about who was okay. So I took those names and compiled them into a list. I figured it would be easiest for everybody to look at a website rather than try to keep up with a lot of emails. This is the very first version of the website that I put up. I've heard from or about the following people with a list of about 15 names. It's a very simple list, nothing automatic about it. That went up about 11:30 in the morning on the 11th.
When government officials were unable to provide information about the missing, a simple website, constructed by a science fiction writer, would take on a phenomenal life of its own.
When I would go in to watch the television, I'd feel very helpless. And when I was at the computer, I felt like I was actually doing something to help.
Hey, we need buckets and a couple guys!
While individual emails were getting through, the main news websites were being completely overwhelmed.
changing the format on the homepage, right?
Yep. Millions were trying to get information from the people in this newsroom at New York Times Digital.
Denial of service attacks are when rogue operators send incredible amounts of traffic to try to swamp the servers of a particular location, thus knocking them offline. The traffic surge was so substantial that our systems people said the only thing they'd seen like it before was a denial of service attack.
Servers were busy crashing from CNN.com to the New York Times website. The fact that many of New York City's TV and radio stations were knocked off air due to a lost transmitter on top of the World Trade Center didn't help.
Our main hosting facility was evacuated and the building was sealed. We were furiously trying to reconfigure things away from servers that weren't working and make do until we could get back into the building, and there was no one there. No one was answering the phones. This is the site, September 11th, early afternoon. There are no graphics on the site. The masthead has been replaced with text. The ads that are normally here have been removed, and the navigation that's normally on the left side of the page is gone.
With the exception of photos shot by an editor on his way into work, the New York Times website was stripped to the bone for the first time ever in an effort to stay afloat. A website that contained hundreds of kilobytes was now a fraction of its original size. After servers were remotely reconfigured from a technician's home laptop, the site was handling up to 1 million hits an hour. There were many behind-the-scenes dramas to cope with crashing websites and networks in turmoil. One of the most disturbing was when the 911 emergency phone network needed to be rescued.
New York City handles about 30,000 911 calls a day. 140 West Street is one of the 2 critical nodes in the 911 network. We collect 911 calls from various central offices throughout the city, bring it to a hub location, and then present it for the police and fire.
When we recognized at around that 4:30, 5 o'clock time frame that we were going to be in trouble with the West Street building, we reached a decision here that we had to move that 911 traffic. And from here, we started the wheels in motion to go ahead and do that.
We have what's called a dual tandem arrangement, meaning that in the worst case, if you lose one of the tandem switches which routes calls to the police and fire, the other switch can take over.
That is not a push the button and all these things go out. This is making some phone calls. You have to alert the PSAP, the Public Service Answering Point, tell the city what we were going to do.
There was not one lost 911 call in the entire city as this switch failed.
Over the course of 2 days, I got over 1 million page views.
Bill Shums' Grassroots Survivors website was being overwhelmed.
As more names started coming in, I needed to create an automated system to be able to keep up with everything. This form would allow someone to type a name in here. I've heard from this person, with some kind of comment like that, and then submit. People from sites like Wired and CNN.com had gotten hold of the email and had posted links to what was becoming known as my survivor registry.
The website was also setting a trend. Within a matter of days, there were about a dozen I'm OK style websites. No sooner than rescue efforts were underway, a massive disaster recovery operation was activated to restore capacity to some of the world's most important communication networks.
We literally rebuilt an entire office out on the street in a lot of cases. We took all the engines, all the emergency power, and put it on the street, ran cables out the windows.
Very strange things were happening to New York City's infrastructure. This unique rerouting operation bypassed a flooded basement at West Street by going out of the window to the nearest working manhole.
Literally on that day, we provided probably close to 10,000 circuits that were required for people like the fire departments, the emergency centers, the hospitals. Every city agency, every state agency came to us and said, we need new lines.
A dozen mobile phone antennas were destroyed when the World Trade Center collapsed, and many more were incapacitated due to a power cut. A high-capacity wireless network needed to be built almost from scratch.
Our main role was to supply cellular service for the rescue workers, firefighters, police officers, because communication was out, power was out, everything was out.
Good night. Yeah. So what time in the morning will you be here?
AT&T Wireless handed out thousands of free mobile phones to be compatible with an impromptu wireless network.
We bring temporary cell sites for more capacity because there's so many more people coming in right now. But we got Cows, which is a cell site on wheels, coming in every day, getting set up, every other corner.
Cows arrived in Lower Manhattan from all across the country, some from as far away as Georgia.
I optimize these cell sites. I make sure they work with each other. Like if you're walking down the street, you have to be able to hand off from one site to the next. Their range is usually 4 blocks or so. Once you walk your 4 blocks or turn the corner, you have to hand into the next site. So I make sure that all works, goes smoothly, so you don't drop the call, and you can make a call when you hit that button.
Within a matter of days, there was more bandwidth capacity for wireless phones in Lower Manhattan than at any point in the city's history. Since September the 11th, an army of Lexant engineers has been working 24/7 to repair Lower Manhattan's fiber optic networks.
We have a fiber emergency to pull in. 24 fiber across 2 manholes and up into a building site.
These engineers claim to know all the secrets of what lies beneath Manhattan's mysterious manholes. Near Ground Zero, voice and data traffic is being restored to one of Wall Street's biggest brokerage houses, Merrill Lynch.
We're bringing a backbone fiber. That's coming from about a mile up the road at one of the regeneration points. So this one run could conceivably feed 15, 20 buildings.
The West Street Exchange is being bypassed with the help of one of the financial district's half-dozen Sonnet rings.
These are all the fiber optic cables that go between providers, customers.
Sonnet rings, or synchronous optical networks, work like a digital ring road around a city or region, linking major hubs. They can automatically detect damage along the ring and reverse the flow of traffic, sending it the other way round to its intended destination. But if there's also damage to an offshoot of the ring, there may be no way to avoid interruption and essential repairs. The Merrill Lynch traffic, now arriving from a different hub, must be manually spliced into the conduits which feed the building.
Yeah, everybody's looking to help, you know, so this helps.
Closer to Wall Street, a high-capacity fiber optic cable is being spliced. It's the thickest cable made and contains over 800 hair-like fibers. It could take weeks to splice together all the fibers in this one cable.
Put that close to the electrode. And there we go. Comes out on the screen. 2.5, that's the unit core I was telling you about.
High-voltage electric arcs melt the glass fibers together. As the Lower Manhattan infrastructure is being made whole again. Given the popularity of mobile phones, payphones were becoming a prehistoric part of Manhattan's infrastructure. Surprisingly, many of them remained working from September the 11th. Then something unbelievable occurred. Thousands of payphones were suddenly free.
To the point of turning all of our payphones, or at least the payphones in that area, into free phones, essentially, for people who are affected. It's not quite that hard. We essentially just assign it what we call a different class of service. We give it dial tone, literally the same way you get dial tone when you pick up your phone at either your home or your business, and we suppress the billing so that people can take advantage of this situation in an emergency.
Network Operations, Joe Edel, how may I help you?
Even as life attempts to return to normal, there's rarely a dull moment managing a global network.
I don't even know what to describe a typical day for network management anymore, because you never know what you're going to work on, what might fail, what might not fail, what disasters might occur.
We have process error on this. All right, we'll make it 12:44 as the uptime. All right, thank you very much, Alan. You have a nice afternoon. Bye. Bye now. It's working. Pulled the wrong fiber. Whoops is right.
Disasters are not the only things which generate sudden spikes on the network.
You might have a radio station giving away a car, and you have a lot of kids, and they're interested in that car. They're going to pick up the phone and try to get through, and afterwards they're going to hit that redial. And they might hit the redial again, and they might hit it again.
Spikes like these are part of the daily rough and tumble of life on the network. But the avalanche of calls on September the 11th pushed the AT&T network far beyond its capacity. 430 million call completions in one day was an all-time record, 100 million more than ever before. With call gapping activated, a disastrous blue map would begin to look like a network again. But an astronomical number of call attempts didn't stand a chance, regardless of who was making them.
September 11th was one of those days we will probably never forget here in the AT&T Network Operations Center. We saw the pain and anguish others were experiencing, and we really wanted to help people complete. And that was on a personal level versus it being a business level.
It was not by way of a phone call that Denise learned that her brother, who worked at the World Trade Center, was likely to be okay. It was while watching one of her screens.
We saw him running for his life on TV. That's how we found out.
Late in the evening of September the 11th, they would finally connect by phone. Events in September have also triggered a dramatic rethink of the role of communications in times of national crisis. Andrew Rache is an internet entrepreneur and advisor to the US Senate.
We have this huge opportunity to take advantage of one of the core assets of the United States, which is technology professionals, and use them to provide support in the event of an emergency and potentially in civil defense. Basically identify those people who understand how to build websites, those people who know how to develop code for building databases, those people who know how to plug networks and hubs and wires together to make computer networks work, to be deployed in the event of an emergency.
Events of September the 11th made unprecedented demands on all communication networks, highlighting their strengths, revealing their limitations, and exposing their vulnerabilities. Deploying the National Guard into cyberspace is a scenario for future emergencies. In the meantime, the Empire State Building is once again the tallest building in New York City.